You walk into a locked psychiatric ward and say one strange word. You tell the admitting doctor you hear a voice saying, hollow, empty, thud. You answer every other question honestly. Your job, your history, your real name. Within minutes, your entire life is reduced to one label on a chart: schizophrenia. The man who tried this first is David Rosenhan. He was a psychologist and law professor at Stanford University. In the early 1970s, he becomes obsessed with one question: can psychiatrists really tell who is sane and who is not? He decides to test the system from the inside. Rosenhan recruits 7 other volunteers, friends and colleagues, 8 people in total, including himself, a graduate student, a painter, a pediatrician, a housewife, all psychologically healthy by standard testing. Their mission is simple and terrifying: get locked up in psychiatric hospitals by faking one symptom. Each volunteer uses the same script at intake. They report hearing unfamiliar voices saying hollow, empty, thud, no other hallucinations, no bizarre beliefs, no history of illness. As soon as they are admitted, the voices disappear. From that moment on, they act completely normal. Between 1969 and 1972, they target 12 hospitals across the United States. Some are old state institutions with barred windows. Others are new, research-oriented university hospitals. Some are understaffed and chaotic. Others are well-funded and prestigious. Rosenhan wants to know if context changes the diagnosis. Every single pseudo-patient is admitted. 11 receive a diagnosis of schizophrenia. 1 receives manic depressive psychosis, what we now call bipolar disorder. None are flagged as imposters by staff. Their ordinary behaviors are reinterpreted through the lens of illness. Writing notes becomes pathological writing behavior. But here's the strange part. The actual patients often sense something is off. One man whispers, "You're not crazy, you're a journalist or something." Another says, "You're a professor checking up on the hospital." Rosenhan later reports that 35 out of 118 patients suspect faking. The professionals in charge do not. Once inside, the pseudo-patients follow one rule. They must get out using only honesty. They tell staff the voices are gone and they feel fine. They behave politely, attend groups, take notes. Still, discharge takes days to weeks. The average hospital stay is 19 days. One volunteer is held for 52. When they finally leave, something chilling appears on their charts. The diagnosis is not removed. It is reclassified as schizophrenia in remission. The message is clear and devastating. You were sick, now you are temporarily better. Normal behavior is recast as a fragile pause in underlying madness. After the first study, one research hospital challenges Rosenhan. They insist their staff would never be fooled that way. Rosenhan proposes a second test. Over the next 3 months, he says, pseudo-patients will attempt admission. Staff should rate each new patient on a scale of suspicion. The hospital accepts the challenge and begins screening. Over that period, 193 real patients are evaluated. Staff label 41 as strong suspects. They flag many more as possible pseudo-patients. Then Rosenhan reveals the twist. He never sent anyone. Every single flagged imposter was genuinely seeking help. Together, the 2 studies expose a brutal dilemma. When staff are cautious, they admit healthy people as mentally ill. When staff are skeptical, they dismiss sick people as fakers. Rosenhan concludes that psychiatric diagnosis is far less reliable than people believe. In his words, it is often more about context than pathology. The data are not just numbers. Pseudo-patients describe being ignored during ward rounds. Staff talk over them as if they are invisible. Personal histories are rewritten to fit diagnostic expectations. A close relationship with parents becomes evidence of dependency. A distant relationship becomes evidence of hostility. The label shapes every interpretation. In January 1973, Rosenhan publishes his paper in the journal Science. The title is On Being Sane in Insane Places. It becomes one of the most cited articles in psychiatric history. His work helps fuel pressure to overhaul diagnostic criteria. Within a decade, the American Psychiatric Association releases DSM-3 with stricter definitions. But here's the part most textbooks skip. Psychiatrists like Robert Spitzer quickly attack the study's methods. They argue the design is misleading and the sample tiny. Decades later, journalist Susanna Cahalan reinvestigates Rosenhan's claims. In her 2019 book, she alleges missing records, composite cases, and possible fabrication. In 2023, historian Andrew Scull calls the experiment successful scientific fraud. Yet, the uncomfortable question refuses to disappear. Even if Rosenhan exaggerated, the core problem persists. How do you prove sanity inside a place built to contain madness? How much power should a diagnostic label have over your entire identity? And what happens when a system stops seeing the person and only sees the diagnosis? The loudest thud was never the imaginary sound in their heads. It was the sound of a door locking behind people who did not belong there. The experiment may be flawed, even fraudulent, but the fear it revealed is still real. In any system, the scariest thing is not being sick. It is losing the right to define what sane means for yourself.